Alright everyone, it's time for the second of our predetermined typings to do a top 10 of, and this time it's the fairy typing. Last week we handled the ghost typing, and I feel we had some really interesting Pokemon pop up there despite it being a rather small typing, and the fairy type is actually a rather small typing as well. This list was put together with tons of stuff taken into account, with a little extra focus put on the competitive aspect of things. I feel that these fairy types we have here today represent some of the best of the typing, and I really hope you guys see that. So let's look over the newest typing introduced in the games back in X and Y and find out what the top 10 is. We start off the top 10 with none other than the 8th generation's Grimstar. If you guys remember, back when we did the top 10 dark types, Grimstar was able to make it onto the top 5, but this time among its fairy type peers, it only cracks the top 10. Now fairy and dark are a duo of good typings, which come together to create a very good attacker that also has the privilege of being on a short list of Pokemon that can Gigantamax. The great thing with Grimstar is just how much it makes use of its stab typings. It has some fantastic moves in its pulls on both ends, for instance having Spirit Break and Play Rough, which are the only physical fairy moves it can get its hands on. Then for dark type moves, it has a lot of the usual ones you see, like Foul Play and Sucker Punch. There are a bunch of other coverage moves it can learn on both the physical and special side of things for several typings, like Fighting, Electric, Ice, Fire, and more. Grimstar is just so good with that 120 attack stat, ability to Gigantamax, that massive amount of HP gained, and having access to the signature move G-Max Snooze. What holds it back is the speed it has, and really just it being a better representation of the dark typing as opposed to the fairy typing. Though, as you're going to see with the next Pokemon, just because you're a dual type that's better on one end, doesn't mean you aren't still good enough to be brought up on the other end. So speaking of Pokemon that are a lot better on one end, we move on now to Tapacoco. Now Tapacoco is definitely a much better electric type than it is a fairy type, and you'll see it again whenever we get around to the top 10 electric types. Now what I'm about to talk about is mostly Tapacoco making use of its electric typing. Just know that I still see a lot of merit in its abilities as a fairy type. Why? Before I even talk about its main typings, I'll address its fairy move pool, which includes just Dazzling Gleam and Nature's Madness. But with Nature's Madness, it can get access to the move Guardian of Alola, thanks to the Tapu Z. Those are of course a couple of good moves, and while Tapacoco has no physical fairy moves, despite being more of a physical attacker, it can still make use of special moves with that special attack being base 95. The rest of Tapacoco's good qualities come overwhelming from its electric side. It gets access to moves like Wild Charge, Volt Switch, and Electro Ball, which really is optimal considering the 130 base speed Tapacoco has. It sets up electric terrain with its ability, which powers up its electric type moves and can prevent it from being put to sleep. Tapacoco is just really good, and while it doesn't do a lot of things right on the fairy side of things, that doesn't change the fact that it is a really good Pokemon with the fairy typing. Next up on the list, we have a Pokemon that inherited the fairy typing back when it was introduced, and was given one of the best Mega Evolutions at the time, the Deceiver Pokemon, Malwa. Malwa is one of a few Pokemon on this top 10 to have both the Steel and Fairy typing, and while it is the first of the few to be featured, that doesn't mean it isn't a great one. As a regular Pokemon, it gets access to the ability Sheer Force, which is a great ability as many of you already know. Some of Malwa's moves, like Play Rough and Iron Head, get boost from this ability, and that's a pretty great thing, considering it'll also be able to run a Life Orb just to hit even harder. Though, its other abilities aren't all that bad either, as Intimidate is useful for when you want to try crippling a physical attacker, and Hyper Cutter helps prevent others from doing that to Malwa. The highlight of this Pokemon though, is definitely its Mega Evolution, which I mentioned earlier was one of the best when Mega Evolution first dropped in the 6th generation. Malwa just might be a candidate for a Pokemon that got the biggest buff of all time. I mean, considering what happened to in X and Y, getting a Mega and having the Fairy typing added. As a Mega, Malwa gets access to the ability Huge Power, which doubles its attack stat, meaning if you're running a 252 in attack and Adamant Natured Mega Malwa, you're going to see its attack stat leap to 678, which just enables it to tear through so many different opponents. Its physical defense is also pretty great, like many other Steel types, and that's something that can sometimes get lost in the shuffle, considering how great it is as an attacker. We now move on to our first 6th generation Pokemon, the mythical Diancie. So Diancie was already a pretty good Pokemon on its own right, but then when Oris came about, they decided to give it a Mega Evolution that pushed it over the top even more as an attacker. Before I get into how good Diancie is though, I'd like to just point out why it's here and not higher up on the list. As some of you probably guess, its typing is what provides a big problem, as being a fairy and rock type leaves it dangerously vulnerable to steel type moves, and when it Mega Evolves, a great amount of its defenses are converted to offensive stats. So Mega Diancie can meet the mercy of strong steel types, and a well-placed bullet punch from a strong Pokemon has a real possibility of one hitting it. Though, that aside, its defenses as a non-Mega Evolved Pokemon are great, with 150 in each. And even then, it still has 100 base in both attacks, so it'll be capable of hitting hard. Some of the great moves it has include Diamond Storm, Power Gem, Moonblast, and Stone Edge. And since Diancie is very capable on both offensive ends, the opportunities to run a mixed attacker, or just do one or the other, are plentiful. It's got Magic Bounce as a Mega too, which serves as a great repellent for entry hazards. And Clear Body in its normal form prevents stat drops. Diancie just offers a great option of either being a wall or a massive attacker, and while it suffers a major blow from steel types that I feel limits it, I can't deny its greatness in certain situations, and that's why I made it up to number 7. Sorry to some of you, as I'm sure you're going to be disappointed, but the next Pokemon here is yet another legendary after we had Tapacoco appear already. This isn't even the last of the legendaries you'll get, but when we talk about a typing like the fairies, you just can't avoid the many great legendaries that the typing boasts. This Pokemon, Topolele, is definitely the top of the Tapus, with its 130 base special attack and 115 special defense. Fun fact too, Topolele is actually my 6th favorite Pokemon, so a lot of really cool bias going on here right now. Not really, I'm kidding. Topolele's ability sets up the Psychic terrain, which not only stops priority moves from hitting, like Fake Out and Sucker Punch, but it also boosts the power of Psychic-type moves by 30%, thus enabling Topolele to smack out just about any Pokemon with its powerful Psychic-type moves. Topolele's great move pull includes Moonblast, which will hit so many different typings for tremendous damage. And when it pulls out moves like Psychic or Psyshock, it can do good damage to one of the greatest weaknesses Topolele has to deal with in poison types. It doesn't just make good use of its stab though, as it also has a wide variety of coverage moves it can take advantage of, like Focus Blast, which will cover against the steel types, and Shadow Ball, which covers ghost types. Topolele is very set up to have a moveset that can handle all of its weaknesses very well, and with those fantastic stats, it truly becomes clear how it finds itself at this point on the list. I wish it could have been higher, but man, the fairy typing is just so loaded with major talent. Speaking of Pokemon with a Fairy and Psychic typing, we open up the top half of this list with one of the most beloved Pokemon of the 3rd generation, the always popular Gardevoir. Gardevoir got the biggest boost from getting the Fairy typing when it was introduced in the 6th generation, taking an already great Psychic type and pushing it way over the edge. Gardevoir has 5 less points in special attack than Topolele, with the same special defense at 115. It has the same great move pool for both of its typings, and can absolutely wreck an opponent on its own. It's got great abilities as well, one being Trace, that allows it to copy the opponent's ability upon switch-in, and which can lead to some pretty interesting abilities to power up an already great Pokemon. The other ability it gets is Synchronize, which will pass over any status element it gets to the opposing Pokemon. That's also a pretty interesting ability to work with too. However, when it Mega Evolves, it gets even stronger and faster. And the ability it gets, whoo-hoo-wee! Mega Gardevoir has 165 base special attack, 135 base special defense, and 100 base speed, turning into an absolute demon on the special side of things. It has an arguably better ability than either of Topolele's with Pixelate, which will turn all of its normal type moves into fairy moves, and powers them up, meaning it can turn this something like Hyper Voice to absolutely annihilate the opponent. Gardevoir was absolutely tearing things up as just a pure Psychic type prior to the 6th generation, but once the Fairy typing was added in, it became a wrap. You know, I think this same exact thing happened back on the Psychic type list. It's pretty weird. It's pretty wild to think we've made it this far without bringing out a 1st generation Pokemon on the list. But don't you worry, Gen 1ers out there, I've got one for you, and it's the fairy Pokemon itself, Clefable. Now, let me just say that while Clefable isn't exactly the most exciting name that's been featured thus far, and is the final non-legendary or mythical Pokemon to be a part of the rankings, but it's pretty much safe to say that Clefable is the master of all non-legendary fairy types. It's got access to an absolutely fantastic ability with Magic Guard, which is probably the best of the three, allowing it to run something like Life Orb and take no damage from it, as well as avoiding any damage from entry hazards. Its move pool is absolutely nuts as well, with Moonblast leading the charge. But then it also has a dozen great coverage moves to follow it up. You've got Flamethrower, Thunderbolt, Ice Beam, Mystical Fire, Psychic, Tri-Attack, Shadow Ball, and just so many others that Clefable is literally drowning in coverage. Its stats are pretty good too, with base 95 special attack, base 95 HP, and base 90 special defense, which makes it an all-around special Pokemon. It makes great usage of a move like Calm Mind. Being able to take heavy hits while doing damage using a myriad of different coverage moves turns a Pokemon that is just alright into a massive champion out in the battlefield. Clefable may have been something of an afterthought up until the fairy typing was announced, but now it's just a legend in its own right. So, like I said, there are only mythicals and legendaries left, and we start with the mythical at number 3, the artificial Pokemon, Magyrna. Let's start right off the bat by talking about this great typing, something that we brought up earlier with Malwa, and we'll talk about once more before this video is over. Steel Fairy is just so good, and even when we're talking about a special attacker, you can still make great usage of this typing offensively. Plus the ability Soul Heart, which is exclusive to Magyrna, acts almost like Beast Boost, except it'll activate whenever any Pokemon faints, so Magyrna's special attack can get maxed out pretty quickly in a double battle. It's already sitting at base 130 special attack, and with those 115 defenses, it truly is a Pokemon to be reckoned with on the battlefield. Magyrna has a wide variety of good moves that take advantage of its stab, like Moonblast and Flash Cannon, as well as its signature move Floor Cannon, which is essentially a stronger version of Draco Meteor for fairy types, and thus it benefits greatly from having boosted special attack. It has other good moves it can use too, like Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, and Focus Blast, which serve as fantastic coverage for it. It's also got a ton of resistances, and only weakness to fire and ground, meaning on the defensive end, it's going to be just as good as it is offensively. The one thing that definitely forced Magyrna to stay here at only number 3 though, is its awful speed. And while it isn't all that great, you can run a move like Trick Room to really help deal with that unfortunate slowness. All in all, Magyrna is absolutely fantastic, and is definitely one of the best fairy typing out there. So for the penultimate Pokemon, we have the first ever fairy type legendary and the Pokemon adorning the cover of Pokemon X, Xerneas. This legendary is an absolutely massive threat as a fairy type, and it's all thanks to its signature move Geomancy. This move doubles Xerneas' special stats in speed, and it would normally take 2 turns to activate properly, but thanks to items like the Power Herb, it can be done all in 1 turn. Geomancy is just really OP, and with the wide move pool that Xerneas has, which includes Moonblast, Focus Blast, and Thunderbolt, it's going to have quite a few moves that it can turn to, which make use of its high special attack. Speaking of that special attack, it's 131 base, and considering it can be doubled thanks to Geomancy, you know it's really good. There actually isn't much to say about Xerneas beyond what I have already. I guess one last thing that I can bring up is the fact that it has the ability Fairy Aura. Fairy Aura pretty much makes fairy type attacks stronger. Xerneas used to be the top dog when it came to fairy types, but unfortunately for it, an actual dog came and took its spot. That's right, and that dog Pokemon is Pokemon Sword's Zaccian. This legendary is no doubt the best of the best when it comes to fairy types, having 2 forms which are each very strong. The hero of many battles has an attack stat of 130 and defenses that touch 115, followed along with a great speed stat of 138. Surely you guys see just how insane these stats are, but they get even more massive when the crowned sword form is attained. Then, Zaccian's attack hits 170 base, and its speed goes up to 148. And really, that's just so obscene. When it switches into battle, thanks to Intrepid's sword, it even gets a 1-stage boost to its attack, enabling it to hit even harder. Its move pool is highlighted by Play Rough and Iron Head, as well as Close Combat. This typing, as we've spoken about before, is so good defensively, and being that Fairy and Steel have some great offensive moves to use, it's just as good offensively, especially on a Pokemon like Zaccian. It's just so good that I'm really running out of stuff to talk about it. Ironhead turns into Behemoth Blade when in the Crown Sword form, and that hits really hard and will do extra damage to Dynamax Pokemon. And considering how popular Gigantamaxing is in this generation, a move like this really plays well. There's just really no denying it. On all fronts, Zaccian is the best of this typing. Well guys, that's gonna do it for this top 10. Looking over the still short lifespan of the fairy typing was a ton of fun, and I'm quite happy with the way the list came out. This typing is just chock full of great Pokemon, and while it was hard at some points to figure out what should actually make this list, it was worth it. Let me know what you guys think though, and I'll be sure to check it out down below in the comments. Also, let me know what typing you want to see covered in our next top 10. If you enjoyed the video, why not leave a like and subscribe to my channel with notifications on, that way you never miss an upload. If you guys enjoyed this content, maybe you'll enjoy my anime content and gaming content as well. I do a lot of anime top 10s and discussions, and with the gaming channel, I play Pokemon and everything Nintendo. Also follow me on social media so you get updates about when I go live on Twitch or when I upload in general. Links for all that will be in the description below. If you want to support me even further and gain cool perks, check out my Patreon. These lovely people have all given me their support over there, and I couldn't be more grateful to them. I think I'm gonna wrap this up though. I'm Mystic Umbreon, and I will see you in the future for more awesome Pokemon content.